Our journey began in Al-Khabar in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. We were driven to the airport for our overnight flight to Addis Ababa with Ethiopian Airlines. After a few hours layover at Bole International Airport, we boarded our connecting flight to Namibia. Our trip would cover almost 2,000 kilometres in 5 stunning locations. So join 2 intrepid travellers as we embark on our Namibian adventure. We arrived at Windhoek, the capital of Namibia, and were driven through some stunning Namibian scenery to our stopover hotel, the charming, elegant guest house. Our hire car was delivered to us, an enormous Toyota Hilux which we nicknamed Harry. He would be our trusty steed for the remainder of the holiday. Our evening was spent at the highly recommended Joe's Beer House, where we indulged in some delicious German-style food and sampled local beer and wine. What a great start to our Namibian adventure. After an excellent night's sleep, we had a very leisurely start to the day before embarking on our 350-kilometre drive to Sossusvlei. We began our journey on tarmacked roads, which soon yielded to the gravel-top surfaces which would feature for most of our driving in Namibia. The scenery was absolutely spectacular and the journey passed very quickly.
I feel so alive as I reach out to the sky.
We were blessed with some unexpected wildlife sightings, including a small troop of chacma baboons. One of the most fascinating sections of today's journey was the Sprektuta Pass between Nauchas and Solitaire, with gradients of between 1 in 4.5 and 1 in 6. It is the steepest pass in Namibia, as well as the one straddling the largest elevation distance, descending almost 1,000 metres in 4 kilometres. The views from the stopping place were breathtaking, and we had to drag ourselves away as there was still some distance to travel. We had our first glimpse of an oryx, the national animal of Namibia, but we had no time to stop. The sun was now fading fast and we were eager to get to our destination before nightfall.
In bad times, I know I'll be okay, 'cause I found my way.
It was an early start for us the next day to visit the Namib National Park, home to the magnificent dunes of Sossusvlei. Following the now dry Shobe riverbed, we arrived at the entrance, and after only a small queue and a short drive, we were treated to a beautiful desert sunrise. We arrived at Dune 45, a star dune, which are formed when there is no prevailing wind. It's a very pretty dune and one of the most photographed in the region. It is 80 metres high and composed of sand particles from 5 million years ago. It was a particularly windy day, so the climb was a little challenging, but the views from the top were amazing. Big Daddy Dune is the tallest in the Sossusvlei area, At 325 metres high, it dwarfs the other dunes. The hike along the length of the arm and then on to summit the main dune would have taken over 4 hours, so we just admired him from afar. Our next stop was the iconic Dead Flay, meaning dead marsh. It was formed when the Chaub River flooded, creating temporary pools where the abundance of water allowed the camel thorn trees to thrive. When the climate changed and drought hit the area, the sand dunes encroached and blocked the flow of the river. The trees died and the remaining tree skeletons are believed to date back between 600 and 700 years. Their blackened appearance is due to the intense heat of the Namibian sun. Though not petrified, the wood does not decompose because it is so dry. The whole area had an otherworldly appearance. The day was running away from us and our champagne lunch was beckoning. We were joined by some inquisitive wildlife on the lookout for a tasty morsel or two. The food and drink were absolutely delicious. The day was far from over, so on to our next location, taking in some more wildlife sightings and more wonderful scenery as we travelled to Sesrim Canyon. Sesrim is a natural canyon created by the flow of the Chaub River in the sedimentary rock. The canyon measures about 1 kilometre long and up to 30 kilometres deep. The name Sesrim in Afrikaans means 6 rawhide thongs. It was given by the settlers on the Doorsland Trek, who had to join 6 such thongs together in order for a bucket to reach the water. Sesrim Canyon is only 2 metres wide in some places and has a portion that permanently contains water, which many animals use for drinking. It had been a long day, so after an enjoyable dinner we retired for the night as another busy day was planned for tomorrow. Well, there are far worse views to wake up to on your birthday and far less wonderful places to relax and enjoy. The Desert Homestead is not only a beautiful place to stay, but offers some fantastic activities, including a variety of horse riding experiences. Our first activity of the day was a drive out to the Nuras wine estate. Fortunately, we were provided with a driver for the day so that Matt could fully enjoy the experience. We were treated to a private tour of the vineyard and winery and learned about the fascinating history of Nuras. The guided walk took us through the estate's vineyards and to the natural springs that supply water for the winemaking process. There were some impressively tall palm trees and the whole estate was very picturesque indeed. An unexpected delight was a mob of meerkats on the lookout for their friend, Alan. The tour continued into the winery where we learned all about the production and bottling techniques. Nuras is still a relatively small producer, so the techniques are quite traditional and in some ways old-fashioned, which just added to our enjoyment of the tour. After the tour, we were treated to the wine tasting experience. The estate produces mainly red wine in several varietals, but has recently branched out into producing a rosé wine and a dessert wine, a brandy, and their latest addition is a special rum. We were given a selection of 4 of the reds to sample, along with a delicious cheese platter. The surroundings were absolutely stunning. Sadly, it was time to say goodbye to Nooraz, but we had yet another wonderful experience planned. The hour's drive to our next location again took us through some wonderful scenery. We were going to be spending the afternoon at Le Mirage Resort and Spa. It was a real oasis in the middle of the desert. The resort and spa has a castle-like exterior, giving it an architecturally quaint and almost eccentric feel. After welcome drinks, we indulged in some massage treatments, and feeling very relaxed, we were then driven to our final activity of the day, a sundowner game drive. Vincent, our guide, collected us, and we set off during the golden hour just before sunset. Wildlife sightings included Spotty the adopted zebra and the industrious sociable weaver birds and their magnificent nest.
Hold on, baby, I don't dance, but how I love to be around you. I'm not scared to take a chance. Yeah, I'm so happy that I found you. We got something better than the others. We can fly higher than an eagle. Take me somewhere we can be together. Oh, how I love to be around you.
We arrived at the sundowner point, ready to enjoy some birthday fizz and nibbles. Vincent treated me to Happy Birthday Namibian style, along with some out-of-time clapping. It was touchingly sweet.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. May the light of the Lord shine on you. Happy birthday to you.
Perhaps the most amazing gift of today was one of the most incredibly beautiful sunsets that I had ever experienced. It was a perfect end to a perfect day. This would certainly be a birthday to remember.
We got something better than the others. We can fly higher than an eagle. Take me somewhere we can be together. Oh, how I love to be around you.
Back to the lodge, and Matt set up for some time-lapse astrophotography of the Milky Way. He was joined by an inquisitive black-backed jackal who was particularly interested in Matt's brand new camera. The next morning we discovered the reason for his curiosity. He was scoping out a potential midnight snack. The strap was completely destroyed and the memory cards lost, crushed and damaged. Even the hard casing itself had shown signs of being chewed. There were real concerns that not only would last night's footage not have recorded, but potentially the camera might have been damaged beyond repair. After nervously waiting for the battery to recharge and saying a little prayer, this is what had been recorded. Some breathtaking shots of the Milky Way core in the clear Namibian night sky. And a magical moonrise immediately before the jackal strike at 1:45 a.m. But all was not lost. It was an early start to the day for a morning on horseback. It had been a very long time since I had been on a horse, and it hadn't been terribly successful that time. My horse was called Red Cat, even though he was white. He had 2 speeds, barely moving or red rum. It was more than a little unnerving. Matt's horse was called Blackjack, and he was much more even-tempered, though he did keep stopping to eat grass every 5 minutes. The morning sun made the scenery appear even more beautiful, and after about an hour, we arrived at the spot where we would enjoy our champagne breakfast. What a treat this was, a delicious breakfast with everything you could want, and champagne in stunning surroundings. We were very well fed and watered, and so were Red Cat and Blackjack. The trek home was a little easier. I think Red Cat knew his morning shift would soon be over. We had had a fantastic morning. I just won't be training for the Grand National anytime soon. It was time to say goodbye to Desert Homestead and journey to our next stop, the seaside town of Swakopmund, some 350 kilometres away. The scenery, as always, was beautiful, and oftentimes we were the only car on the road for miles. We needed fuel, so we stopped off in Solitaire, a one-horse town in the middle of nowhere, but it is a visitor's must-see. It was such an interesting place with some amusing exhibits. Not far out of Solitaire, we crossed the Tropic of Capricorn, which I found particularly interesting. The road took us through the Guab Pass, a mountain pass at an elevation of 350 metres above sea level, with some wonderfully undulating scenery which looks like green sand dunes.
I found my way. I was in the dark against it all, but made it through the day, 'cause I found my way.
The road has many sharp twists and turns, and it was really exhilarating.
'Cause I found my way.
It was evening time when we arrived at Swakopmund, just in time for a glorious sunset. Swakopmund is situated in the Namib Desert and has around 44,000 inhabitants, making it the fourth largest population centre in Namibia. It was founded in 1892 as the main harbour for German Southwest Africa. Today it is a very popular seaside resort for both domestic and international tourists. A sea mist had rolled in but made for some interesting beach scenery and gave the lighthouse a very mysterious feel. Swakopmund has a real German atmosphere to it, reflected in the colonial architecture, German street names, a German daily newspaper, and the German language being widely spoken. One of the curiosities of the city is its population of very tame guinea fowl, which wander through the local park. It was an interesting drive to today's activity. We passed a gnarly boat wreck, a handsome black-backed jackal, and a flamboyance of flamingos, all before we even arrived at the kayaking with seals experience. The sea mist kept the temperatures down, but all suited and booted in appropriate clothing, we headed out in our two-person kayak for a day on the water, which luckily for a landlubber like me was like a mill pond. Cape fur seals are possibly the most curious and playful mammals we will ever have the joy of interacting with in their natural environment. They have two thick layers of fur, a soft inner layer and a bristly outer layer. This fur helps keep them warm in the freezing water in which they like to fish and play. Cape fur seals are endemic to southern Africa, with colonies all along the coastlines of Namibia and South Africa. Once they've reached adulthood, males can weigh up to 350 kilograms, females typically weigh in at around 80 kilograms. From awkward and clumsy land dwellers, members of the local colony metamorphosize into graceful and elegant dancers once in the water, spinning and twirling as they welcome you into their playground. So enough facts and figures, we were here to enjoy watching them play, and it was a captivating experience. day's main activity would be dune driving at the spectacular Sandwich Harbour, which in all the guidebooks is described as where the dunes meet the sea. The sea mist continued today, but Bruno, our guide, assured us it would be clear and bright by mid-morning. We arrived at the starting point for the drive, and Bruno was indeed correct. The mist had cleared and we were looking forward to the day ahead. There aren't words to describe how breathtakingly beautiful this area is, and the dunes do indeed meet the sea. The harbour was founded in 1486 by Portuguese sailors. Sources claim that there was a moderately sized commercial port based around whaling and small-scale fishing during the 19th century. Today, Sandwich Harbour does not refer to the forgotten port, but solely to the beautiful lagoon. Bruno insisted we earned our lunch, so we had to climb a really steep and high dune and back. It was a bit of a challenge as the day had certainly warmed up. The views from the top were more than worth it, and it was much quicker and easier on the downhill section. Back in the car and off on our dune safari. The tide was coming in fast, and it was an exciting drive out of the lagoon to beat being stranded by the sea. You can see just how close we came. Whilst Matt and I had done dune driving many times before in Saudi Arabia, Bruno took it to a new level. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal amounts, as some of the slopes we drove down had almost gravity-defying gradients. I was glad when it was time for our delicious lunch, which we enjoyed with another beautiful view. The day was nearly over, but not before Bruno had shown us some more wildlife. Whilst we had seen springbok before, it was lovely to see them in this particular environment. The really interesting creatures were the tiny but noisy barking gecko and the translucent and alien-looking web-footed gecko. Both were fascinating. On the way back, we passed a salt plain glistening white in the Namibian sun, a pink salt river and a salt pyramid. The other famous residents in the area are the flamingos. There are two types, greater and lesser, but both are equally beautiful. Thousands of flamingos inhabit Walvis Bay's wetlands, and the result is a sea of pink as far as the eye can see. The taller of the two species is the greater flamingo, and their plumage tends to be more white than pink. Greater flamingos have light pink beaks with a dark tip. Lesser flamingos are more pink in colour and their legs are shorter. Their beaks are a dark red with a black tip. Back to the hotel for a freshen up before dinner. What a totally brilliant day out this has been. The next day we drove the 250 kilometres from Swakopmund to Damaraland.
A new place, a new home, for a while, let me feel alive.
On the way to Cape Cross, just a few kilometres from Walvis Bay, there is a shipwreck called Zella. It is the most intact shipwreck along this section of the coast, so we stopped to take a look.
Life is good, best I've ever felt.
From here we took the detour to Brandberg or Burning Mountain.
Get me up, somewhere new, somewhere I can find myself. Oh, I feel so alive.
Brandberg's highest point is the Königstein, German for Kingstone, standing at 2,573 metres above sea level. It had been recommended to us as a place to see Bushman rock art of the Sand People. Unfortunately, one can no longer hike without a guide, and as it was going to be a 2-hour round trip for the full tour, we just took a few photographs and got back on the road. On a clear day, the Brandberg can be seen from a great distance, and we were surprised just how far we had to drive away to be able to photo the whole of the mountain. Deertail over, and we continue to Okonjima Trail's tented camp.
'Cause I find my way, my way, my way.
We arrived at our next location by early afternoon. The accommodation was fairly basic but had everything we needed, and the view from the tent was absolutely stunning. We were the only guests for the duration of our stay, so the staff were really happy to see us, and we took no time in making it our home. After welcome drinks overlooking the river gorge, watching the baboons play, we got ready for the first activity of the afternoon, a visit to the village school. The local school was a good hour's drive away from the lodge, over some really rocky terrain. The school consisted of a number of pretty blue and white buildings, and as almost all of the children were boarders due to the distances many of them would need to travel, it was also home to 377 of them aged between 5 and 15. There are currently 10 teachers, meaning class sizes are large, and just 4 house mamas who must be kept on their feet all day long. A full range of subjects are taught. English is the first language, and then the tribal Herero. They also learn how to coexist with the local elephants. Lessons were well over when we arrived, and the children were busy playing in the afternoon sun. They were loud and very boisterous and fascinated by all of Matt's camera gadgets. He gave them his camera to take some footage themselves, and this is what they came up with, some very creative shots. The children showed genuine exuberance when they talked about learning. I hadn't realised just how much this experience would affect me. And now, weeks later as I record this, I'm still remembering the beautiful faces of the children we met there. My heartstrings were definitely pulled that day. From the school, Jackson drove us to a beautiful spot to enjoy our sundowns. The evening was just perfect. There have been many moments on this holiday where I have felt extremely fortunate and privileged, but after visiting the school, I was overwhelmed by just how much we had been blessed. Watching the sun disappear beneath the distant mountain, I prayed I would remain always grateful. The land the camp is situated on is rented from an organisation called ERA, Elephant Human Relations Aid. It was set up to educate the people on how to coexist with the elephants, so both can enjoy sharing this beautiful area. Today, we would be privileged to see these wild elephants enjoying the surroundings of the home they reclaimed. It was a large herd, and we followed them around for the entire morning, just watching them do what elephants do. We were very fortunate to see not one but 2 calves and their mothers. The youngsters, Freya and Matthias, were cousins and were just adorable. We had yet to spot the large bull called Benny, but just as we had packed up from lunch, he appeared at the watering hole. This was just fantastic, and we spent the next 30 minutes watching him have a mud bath. What an absolute delight. Time to say goodbye to Benny and go in search of the area's other inhabitants, giraffes. The area is home to 2 herds of giraffe. They were proving to be elusive, but our guide didn't want to disappoint, so using all of his knowledge and experience, we eventually spotted a breakaway group of 5. Giraffe markings darken as they age, and the difference between these 2 was quite striking. They are just so graceful, so beautiful. Back at the camp, we watched the sun go down with drinks and enjoyed a warming fire, and marvelled at the utter splendour of the Milky Way. It was time to say a sad goodbye to Okonjima Plains. We headed out for our 320-kilometre journey to our next location, Etosha. As always, the scenery was wonderful, and the warthog warning signs never failed to amuse. We passed through Elephant Valley and came across this pretty little lake, and couldn't resist stopping off and taking a short break to stretch our legs.
Life is good, best I've ever felt. Get me up, somewhere new, somewhere I can find myself.
Onwards, ever onwards, and the remaining hours passed quickly, and we arrived at our next location, Oberland Lodge.
As I reach out, reach out, reach out, reach out to the sky.
The lodge and accommodation were absolutely outstanding. I would very quickly run out of superlatives if I had to describe the sheer opulence of this place. We were completely stunned by our so-called tent. We had a spacious sitting area, an enormous bed, 2 sun lounging areas, a massive bathroom and an outside shower. We were going to be here for 3 nights, so it was great to do a proper unpack and get settled in. The lodge has its own private watering hole, so it was just wonderful to sit on the terrace watching the springbok pronk whilst having a little refreshment ourselves. The watering hole was a draw for other animals, including wildebeest and guinea fowl, and a variety of other birds. Day turned into dusk, and dusk became night, providing another stargazing opportunity with our tented palace illuminated against a clear Namibian sky. It was a cold and early start to the day for our game drive in Etosha National Park. Etosha National Park is one of the largest parks in Africa. It spans an area of over 22,000 square kilometres and gets its name from the large Etosha pan. The park is home to hundreds of species of mammals, birds and reptiles, including several threatened and endangered species, such as the black rhinoceros, which we were hoping to see. The Etosha Plains are wide and open, which makes spotting the animals relatively easy with sharp eyes or good binoculars. We saw all creatures, great and small, but some do make the heart beat quicker than others. And if the lion is the king of the plains, we were about to meet their queen. Though limping from an injury and tracker clearly visible, nothing detracted from the sheer majesty of animal royalty. Two males in the distance eyeing up a snack of springbok, which tempted one out for his morning constitutional walk. And answering a call of nature. He seemed rather pleased with himself. Normally, spotting a lion would be the highlight of most safaris, but a sighting of a black rhino is one to be prized, and we were very fortunate to see this one. We enjoyed our packed lunch in front of a waterhole and were quickly joined by springbok, wildebeest and zebras. It was an amazing sight. A thirsty elephant was approaching from the distance. When the elephants arrived, the waterhole cleared. I asked the guide if the animals were afraid of the elephants, to be told they move not out of fear, but out of respect. With the elephants retired to the shade, other animals returned, including some not so graceful looking giraffes. These two are not lovingly courting as one might have thought, but actually two young males sparring, but they did have a referee. We had been out for 9 hours, but had checked off so many of the animals we had hoped to see, it was well worth it. And we were glad to get back to a waterhole of the human variety, where we could relax and reminisce about the fantastic day we had experienced. After a reasonably early start, we drove 220 kilometres to our final location in Namibia, Okonjima.
Nothing to hold me back, take my time, just enjoy.
The lodge is situated in the Okonjima Nature Reserve. As always, the scenery was beautiful, and we even spotted a herd of kudu. We arrived at the entrance, and a sense of expectation descended. Just when we thought this holiday couldn't get any more fabulous, it suddenly did. We arrived to be told that we'd been upgraded to the bush camp. This lodge was just 9 chalets set in the most beautiful Namibian countryside. We were taken to our chalet, which was very privately situated. It consisted of 2 connecting rooms, one housing the bedroom, which had not 1 but 2 queen beds, with a massive picture window affording magnificent views, and a beautifully appointed bathroom. The other room was called the Hide, complete with minibar and 2 large day beds to relax on whilst watching the animals as they sauntered across the grassland directly in front. We settled in and spent the early afternoon in the Hide with a little tipple and watched the animal world go by. Guinea fowl, kudu, springboks and oryx right on our doorstep. It was just wonderful. The Okonjima Nature Reserve is home to the Africat Foundation. The foundation runs many educational, conservation and community awareness programs. This afternoon's activity was leopard tracking. Many of the reserve leopards have been fitted with tracking devices for research purposes. Guides take visitors into the reserve and using a radio receiver can track individual leopards. We were very lucky this afternoon as our guide Apari drove to a high point and picked up a signal. It took a few wrong turns to properly locate the leopard as the tracking equipment isn't super accurate, but that made it even more interesting. The scenery as always was beautiful and there were so many other animals to see en route, including giraffe, so we certainly had plenty to keep us excited. We even spotted the elusive warthog. The tracking continued and the sense of anticipation was palpable. First thing we spotted was the kill, which had been secreted high up in a tree, and then we saw her. She was called Keisha and she was magnificent. She had been on the hunt and taken the antelope she had slain out of the way of potential scavengers. Just being so close to her was simply amazing. If this wasn't spectacular enough, her cub came out of the grasses ready for dinner too. He was the most adorable tiny male called Jono. He joined his mama on the tree, but she wasn't for sharing until she had had her fill and made the hungry cub wait his turn. Eventually he was able to join in the feast and we were captivated just watching them. All cleaned up after dinner, now time to chill in the golden and then pink light of the setting sun. We had a full day of activities planned for today. The first one was a visit to the cheetah reserve. It was a very early and cold start, but we snuggled into our blankets and took in the sensational scenery, made even more beautiful by the golden glow of the rising sun. There were loads of animals to see en route, including this inquisitive black-backed jackal, snacking on his breakfast of an unfortunate guinea fowl. But our main focus was cheetahs, and eventually we found them. First one, and then a group of 5 in total, just lounging about in the morning sun. Whilst cheetahs and leopards look similar to the uninitiated, there are several differences. Firstly, cheetahs don't have a collarbone. This enables them to twist and turn easily when hunting or being hunted. You can see they can get themselves into all kinds of positions, even when just lounging about. Cheetahs have a dark teardrop line underneath their eyes, which leopards don't. Leopards' markings are more like small dark flowers with hints of other colours. Cheetahs' spots are smaller, lighter and more uniform in colour. Both species look magnificent to me, and we were lucky to have been able to see leopards and cheetahs. Proud and haughty looking, it's hard to imagine these creatures as vulnerable, and it's thanks to the work of Africat that they are afforded a greater degree of protection. It was a brilliant start to what turned out to be the most fantastic day. The penultimate activity of the holiday was a game drive. Okonjima is a private reserve, which meant if we spotted something interesting we could go off-road to get a better view, which makes for a much more engaging experience. We were lucky to have such an up-close and personal encounter here. We saw a herd of zebra and another of impala, a trio of ostriches, 1 male flanked by 2 females, 3 very playful bat-eared foxes, and a lumbering hyena. It was like being in the middle of the Lion King. As wonderful as all this was, it was just an amuse-bouche for what was to come, our final activity, walking with rhinos. As part of the AfriCat programme, the Foundation liaises with the Anti-Poaching Authority to protect and monitor the number, health and location of endangered species within the reserve. Apari drove us to meet up with the guide from the authority who was going to be leading us on our walk with rhinos. We had to follow the instructions to the letter, single file only, be as quiet as possible and stay downwind. It was quite hard going at times, but then we spied them, and all of the effort, the scratches and scrapes were totally worthwhile. There were 3 of them. The first thing I noticed was just how large they were at close range. At first they were hidden well enough in the long grass, but when they moved into the clearing we could see them in all of their splendour. We had seen black rhino in Etosha, but here in Okonjima they have the white rhino species. The main difference between the two, apart from the colour, is that the black rhino eat leaves and the white rhino eat grass. Whilst they are relatively safe in the reserve, there is a massive poaching problem in Namibia and other African countries due to the perceived medical benefits from rhino horn. It was an indescribably surreal experience being so close to such amazing animals. It was really very emotional. What a fantastic memory. What a huge privilege. People often ask what was our favourite part of the holiday, but it's very difficult to answer when there have been so many fantastic experiences. The stunning Namibian scenery, which was the backdrop to our trip, was certainly one of the stars, and its beauty meant that the long drives in between locations passed really quickly. Of course, there's all the animals too, and we were fortunate to have some very close and personal encounters, from the playful Cape fur seals in Walvis Bay to the magnificent white rhino in Okonjima and all of those creatures in between. If I had to pick my top 3 wildlife experiences, it would be the elephants in Damaraland and the leopards and white rhino in Okonjima. But it wasn't just about the wildlife. The tour of the Nuras wine estate was really very interesting, topped off with a delicious wine tasting, and the day we spent driving in the dunes and almost were stranded by the sea was tremendously exciting. Every day began with a glorious sunrise and ended with a stunning sunset, and then there were the spectacular night skies too. But the lasting memories I will have will be of the people we met on our travels, all of our lovely guides and drivers, and the boisterous children from the Abraham Garasab school who completely stole my heart. None of these things would mean very much if there wasn't someone to share them with, and for that I'm grateful to have had such an excellent travel companion, Matt. We had enjoyed a really amazing holiday, and I'm very much looking forward to our next adventure together.